No, Victor 66.
66. Okay.
Victor 66 through like through El Centro.
Yeah. Yeah.
So he's like, why aren't you guys going that way? And he's like, well, we have to, take the long route because we try to get it to 2 hours.
Got it.
So 4 hours there, 2 hours to Yuma. Wait for the sun to go down, nighttime conditions,
I've done
and
that.
then night flight from Yuma back to Gateway.
Dude, my TAA, dude, we were we were going to Yuma, and like halfway throughout the flight, he's passed out.
Oh yeah, dude. I won't exactly admit everything that happened, but
dude is passed out.
Oh,
I'm sitting there, and I'm sitting there thinking,
who was it?
I don't understand names.
Oh yeah,
he's a good guy. He's a good guy.
Is this somebody that I know?
But you know what? It showed me? He just flipping worked himself.
Oh, so did I. Are you kidding me?
Dude, he couldn't keep his eyes open.
I couldn't keep my eyes open as well. I'd get home, so I would.
I didn't care. I felt confident in the plan. I was reading a book.
Yeah, I would leave. I would leave at 10:30, 11 in the morning, and I wouldn't get home till 10:30, 11 at night. I'd be gone for 12 hours at a time, and I'd wake up the next day and do it.
You had a goal.
Yeah,
you had a goal.
Let's get those hours as fast as I can, as many hours as I can.
Dude, let me ask you this. And I know it's the best we have, right? It's the best system that we could currently come up with if we ever wish to continue having enough CFIs as we need. Do you think the fact that most people are in it just for the hours, how much do you think that negatively affects flight training?
Oh, a lot.
Interesting. It for sure takes a hit.
It takes a hit because I definitely felt that. I burnt out is an understatement.
And you didn't burn out.
Just talk to my girlfriend at the time, now wife. I would come home and just die, and I'd be like, I don't want to go to work tomorrow, but I have to go to work tomorrow.
Right.
It turned from something that I really enjoyed doing and loved doing to this is a job. This is what pays the bills. This is going to get me to my next goal.
Right.
And it's bad to say that, but I've come back from that. I'm now appreciate flying, but like I was telling you on the way here, I don't want to do more instruction in a 172.
Yeah.
I don't despise instruction. I actually really enjoy instructing people because I love seeing people make epiphanies and and explore new avenues and excel. I love seeing that. I think that's so cool. Like, dude, you just landed this aircraft by yourself. I was hands off. Or, dude, you just flew this instrument approach all by yourself. You did the radios, you did the navigating, you did the communicating, everything, all by yourself. And they're like, "Whoa, no way!" Like, dude, and you come back and you debrief, and you're like, "Dude, this flight was rocking. You did so well on this flight. You did awesome. Like, you are ready for your check ride." Or it's like, "Dude, like, hey, let's work on this next week." Or it's like, "Hey, I want you to go home, study this, do this." Then they come back and they're a rock star, and you're like, "Dude, I'm so proud of you."
Yeah,
I love that part of it. It's
incredible.
I love that part of being a CFI. But and this has nothing to do with ATP. This just has to do with how much I worked. Doing it day in and day out, it became so monotonous that I was just like, tune it all out. When I was up there sitting at cruise, I was listening to music, not talking to my students. I had my arms closed like this, eyes closed. I had my sunglasses on so they couldn't see if my eyes were closed or not. I had my arms closed like this. And I was in a position, like I positioned myself just barely so I was kind of turned towards them. And so they couldn't see into the side of my glasses to see if my eyes were closed. And I would have my head just barely touched it up against the window and I'd be sleeping. And I wouldn't be like full on sleeping where I'm like, snoring. Like I was still there. I could hear the radios and... there was one time I did nod off pretty bad when my head fell, and I was like, And my student was like, "You okay?" And I was like, "Yeah, sorry, I just fell asleep." But I've actually caught a student missing a call when I was asleep.
That's how one you were with the airplane.
That's how one I was with the airplane. I was there, eyes closed, just completely dozed off, and call comes in. I open up my eye to see if he's gonna do it. Nothing. And he's awake. He's fully awake, looking at the controls. I just think he's in another world. Call comes in again, and I'm like, I kind of look at him like, "Hey, did you hear that?" And then finally, third call comes in, and he's like, nothing. And I was like, okay, well, my call. I make the call, and he's like, "Oh, I didn't hear that." And I was like, "I did," and I was sleeping. Like that's the thing is like.
I'm trying to picture a CFI blaming their student, and their argument is, "I caught that and I was sleeping."
I told him that. I literally was like, dude, I was asleep. I was asleep.
Gosh.
I literally was like, dude, I was dozing off. I was not in the aircraft, and I caught a call.
I was sleeping and I caught it.
I was
Imagine
sleeping and I caught
a CFI
it.
telling that to a
But
student.
what I was gonna get to now is like, you develop these like superhuman habits.
Well, you spend so many hours.
You spend so many hours in the plane, you become one with the aircraft, and it was the coolest. Looking back on it now, I didn't really kind of think about it, but now like looking back on it, I'm like, holy crap, dude. I knew exactly how the airplane felt in all the flight attitudes. I was like, I know exactly what's gonna happen. We're coming into landing. I could tell before we're even 20 feet off the ground, before touching down, I can exactly tell you what's going to happen in this landing. Is it going to be off center line? Is it going to bounce? Is it going to be a flat landing? You can tell everything. Like, you just become one with the aircraft.
Is that amazing?
It's probably the coolest thing that I ever developed as a CFI. And I wouldn't say I have it now. I have an understanding of it. I know what I'm looking for, especially in a 172 that I have the most hours in. But like, dude, I had a student, we were going into Carlsbad. And you've flown into Carlsbad plenty of times. You know that the runway slopes up a little bit. What is it, like 3-4 degrees?
That's a lot.
And it's a pretty good amount, right? And there's no other runways around that have that, the opportunity to do that. And I had a student he's a good student. I really had no problems with him, but he kind of just messed up this visual approach into Carlsbad. And I was like, okay, a little shaky, whatever. We're coming in right across the numbers, and I was like, he's going to bounce the absolute hell out of this plane. Like, horrible. Right? Dude, not even 10 seconds later, he literally lands on the nose wheel.
Oh.
And just goes, da-doom, 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 and starts porpoising. He's going in and out and in and out.
Isn't that amazing with porpoising? You're just always a step behind.
Right. It's the craziest thing. And I'd never seen it before. I'd never done it myself, and I'd never had any student do it. But I understood, like, hey, we'll just, you could go around or you can fix it. And I was like, I'm not going around. This is like a 4-hour flight. I'm tired. I want to get out of this airplane. I was like, all right, I grab the controls. I don't take them from him. I'm just saying, all right, follow me. He goes back. I shove it forward. Like, I'm counteracting his counteracting to follow the plane because we're going up. He's pushing down and then back and forth. You know how it goes. And so I grab it. And I'm like, just stop. Just stop. You're going to make it worse. And he didn't realize that. And we stopped and we leveled off. And I was like, just set it down. Just stop the movement.
Yeah.
Stop the movement. It's like in a car. When you're overcorrecting, you're only going to make it worse because you're adding to the overcorrecting.
Right.
Whereas if you just hold it in one and stop all the other variables from going, you can correct it, right? But
yeah, that's the problem with porpoising. It's like
what I thought the whole nose wheel was going to collapse. I really did. We hit the ground and I was like,
hard.
Damn.
Hard.
It was I'm surprised we did not prop strike. Like, we were like this and just da-doom, da-doom, da-doom.
Dude.
I think we did 2 porpoising landings before I was like, okay, this is getting worse. Because, like the line, it's like small and then it's like big, what I'm talking about, like over time, like a time graph. And I was like, this is going to turn into something bad. So, okay, let's fix this right now.
Did you find students how long did it take the average student to get down the autopilot? Like, no problem.
Oh, nothing.
Nothing.
It was nothing. No time. Because most of my students were commercial students. Like, they were confident in their skills, and they knew what they were getting into. And I always assigned them, like, the night before or the day before, I'd say, hey, go review the GFS 700 autopilot. The autopilot manual that we gave them from ATP. And they would come in, and I kind of made it sound a little more serious than what it actually was. Like, hey, you need to know this stuff. Like, you need to know the parameters. And
totally.
You have to have this to be able to turn the autopilot on and blah, 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 And so they came in, and most of the time, I'd say 95% of the time, they came in like, yeah, I know all this stuff. I'm like, all right, cool, you're not going to need any of it. Like, over-prepare.
As long as you read through it.
Right, exactly. I was like, as long as you skim through it, it really doesn't matter to me. But then I'd go through, once we got to the actual aircraft, and go through a whole briefing of the actual buttons in the aircraft, because there's a couple buttons in there. Most of the Cirruses that you fly are G1000, right? Have you ever flown an Avidyne one?
No.
Have you flown a 6-pack one?
No.
Those are only flown G1000.
Cool to see. It's a Perspective Plus, so it's G1000 on steroids.
Yeah, well, it's
close enough.
It's G1000, close enough. So Your GFC, it's not is it a GFC 700 for the autopilot?
It is.
So yours is just down on your little touchpad, right? It's not up on the screens.
Right.
Whereas on the 1000s,
On the MFD.
it's on the MFD, right? Or it can be on both the PFD and MFD.
You can have it on both sides?
Yeah, you can have it on both sides because it's on the screen itself, and the screens are interchangeable.
Got it.
They're the same part number. So I'd go in, I'd give them a whole brief on, what every button does. Literally, what every button does. This is this button. This is this button. I never use the back horse button. We're not going to be using the back horse button, but here's what the back horse button does. And then I'd give them like, hey, we're not allowed per ATP. We're not allowed to activate the autopilot until we're, at least 400 feet AGL.
I think that's a good idea across the board.
Well, yeah, there's a lot of things that like made sense with them. Like you can't fly it below minimums.
That's how I train people.
Well, you can't fly below minimums in general, but that was our, hey, you can't fly below minimums, even though the plane literally would fly itself into the ground. Like if you hopped in a Cessna and you hopped on an ILS and it was a good quality ILS that gave you quality information all the way to the ground, it would fly itself to the ground. Obviously, it wouldn't flare. That's not part of the commute. Like it can't do a Cat 2 auto land, but it would fly itself to the ground. I would tell my students that. They'd be like, "No way!" And I'm like, I've done it in the sim. Like I literally crashed an airplane in a sim just to prove that it did that. But yeah, no, we would go through the briefing, and here's another one of those superhuman strengths. Not a superhuman. In this case, it was just all the damn repetitiveness that I would do. It's the the checklist we had, right? There's a certain flow to the checklist, right? I could sit there on my phone or just sit with my phone on my lap, looking out my window if I see Will out there waving to Will, whatever. And I could hear my student talking, and I would know if they missed something. Like I'm like two places at once, and if they miss something, I'm like, hey, you missed this.
Isn't that incredible?
It's incredible. That was probably, besides feeling the airplane, I think that was probably the coolest thing, was being able to be like, you could go through the whole checklist, and you could do it relatively fast. But I would know if you missed something.
It is kind of
and even if it was
insane.
the most minute thing, like resetting the fuel. Like on the G1000, you reset the fuel every time you hop in, right? I could know without looking at it. If they went through the checklist, it's just like something in my head. Like it was a mental checklist, but I wouldn't necessarily be like, okay, here's this, here's this, here's this. I would just know the flow of everything. And if they were at this point, but they hadn't done something, well, they skipped it. I'd be like, hey, you skipped it. And they'd be like, oh yeah, I did. How'd you do that? You weren't even looking. You weren't even paying attention. I don't know.
I feel it in my bones.
I just know it. Yeah. I just know you missed it.
Yeah.
That part was really cool. That's what I really enjoyed. I mean, as bad as it is to say that I wasn't like following along. Like if it was a new student or if it was a student that wasn't familiar with G1000, because I come out here to California and all the ATPs out here are only 6-pack. Besides, I think they have one in.
You know what? That's
maybe
why
Long Beach.
That's why they paired me on my crew with California people.
Yeah, because they only have.
They didn't have 6-packs for me in Mesa.
ATP. I don't know if this is true. This is just what the rumors were, but ATP is centered in Jacksonville, Florida. California's out here on the West Coast, right? All the planes that have gone through the ATP fleet make their way west.
Overtime.
And by the time that they're ready to die,
California.
they're in California, and they're 6-packs. So that's just was the running joke.
That's actually, you know what's funny though?
I would follow a line though. Like if it was a 6-pack student, I would follow the checklist. Like I would have my finger there just to make sure that they didn't skip anything because it was something new to them.
Right.
So anyway, what were you saying?
No, it's interesting because you were about to say maybe it wasn't right that I was so disconnected at that type of stuff. But you know what? When I think about it, I'm actually very much the student who, more often than not, I'm sure you had some students as an instructor, there's some students
it's like you learn from your student making mistakes.
Yes, but there's various types of students. Here's what I mean. There's some students who, if you're not, you as the instructor are never intervening enough, meaning they could take you teaching them down their throat all day long and it's not enough. And then there's other students who need to have you just shut up.
Oh,
let them do their thing. Just two different types of people.
Yeah.
I very much was the latter. I'm the guy who turned to especially during instrument approaches, I very much turned to my instructor in a nice way. And I said, hey, it's as if you're not here.
Right.
Because the way my head works is I had to do it without any of his input in order to know that I know it.
I get that. No, absolutely. I see exactly where you're coming from.
So on a weird level, you being disconnected or just, not being as involved for some students could be helpful.
Yeah, no, and I see it. I've definitely seen those students before, like students who are definitely more, I wouldn't say independent, but they're able to understand that when you're in the training, like the CFI student environment, my philosophy, and I'm guessing this is kind of what you just explained, is that I shouldn't have to teach you everything. Like, you need to learn to do stuff and stuff like that. Like, this is your flight training experience, not mine. I already did mine, right? I'm here just to assist and just to verify that you've done everything correctly, right? Kind of what they tell you, like a DP, you hop in a check ride and he's like, oh, I'm just here to verify that you're CFI, or like that everything's been taught correctly and
That's a good way to look at it, yeah.
Right? I'm not here to test you. I already know that you could do this. That's why you're here on this check ride.
Right.
I'm just verifying that you do it correctly, So I get that, and I try to put my students in that mentality as well. I try to get my students into an independent mentality of like, hey, I'm not here. Well, I would still give them assignments. This was back when I was just like a primary CFI, not a TA guy, because the TA guy was probably the easiest job
on the planet.
You just hop in the plane, you go. You're with the student for 10 hours, and then you say, see ya.
Man, I bet the conversations you ended up having with people.
Oh, dude, I had some wild
conversations.
I had a student whose previous life, he was, let's just say he liked to experiment.
Oh, my gosh.
With different substances.
Oh.
And he was like, man. And he's like, if there's a God, I talk to him multiple times. A day.
That is so funny.
And like on the weekends, and he's like, yeah, like I can't do that anymore. Like, he's like, I've moved beyond, but
good for him. And now he got into flying.
Well, now he got into flying. He's like, yeah, dude, good for you. He's like, I kind of turned my life around, and I was like, yeah, dude, that's awesome. Like, good for you. I'm proud of you. And some of the conversations are just crazy. Absolutely.